Hi, everybody. This is Kamal Danoa from Pop TV, powered by Pop Ticker, and we're doing things a little differently today. There's a lot going on in the world, and today I have Jatinder JT, who lives in Toronto, but lived a few years in Ottawa going to school. And I also have Afia from Toronto. We've known each other for a few years now. So thank you so much for joining us. And, again, things have been really heavy lately. The world is dealing with a lot. We had, obviously, the global pandemic. We haven't seen anything like this in the world for many, many years. And, it's been tough on everybody. And, the last few days have been very heavy. Mr. George Floyd. Again, our hearts are heavy thinking about, just an innocent man who was unfortunately passed in a very difficult, heartbreaking situation. And, again, just looking at everything going on in this world, it's just been crazy. We have, two astronauts that have left the planet, and not to make light of that. But again, it's just like, I feel like this world has gone mad. I mean, you have, astronauts orbiting outside, you have a global pandemic, and you have this, terrible tragedy that just happened. And now, you turn on the TV, there's riots going on all across US, and this is tough. It's very heartbreaking. And so, I wanted to put together a conversation because I feel like as Canadians, we need to talk. I think everybody is feeling the mental, draining, the anxiety, the heartbreak. And so what I wanted to do is, again, invite, JT and Afia. And, how do you guys feel? I know it's been a devastating week. How are you guys doing? Afia, I'll start with you. How are you doing?
Well, first, thanks for having me on. I first had to deal, like everybody, we all had to deal with the pandemic, and scrutiny, and it was initially difficult to adjust with, and then George Floyd, and then Ahmaud, and I forget her name. Forgive me, Brianna. And then Lucas. It's a lot. I'm angry. I'm hurt. When you hear events like that, when I hear of events like that, it brings me back to my experiences growing up as a kid. And I think that looking back at experiences, I think when they happened to me, the microaggression, the racist remarks, to cope, because it happens so frequently, I dust it under the rug. I pretend like, okay, this is just another day. Because the reality is, every single day, a person of color wakes up and has to face racism. Or just kind of fear, well, what kind of day am I going to have? Is this person going to react to me because of the color of my skin or because of the content of my character? So it's been really heavy, and I'm still processing. I'm really trying to put them in. I can't put them in words. That's why I'm struggling right now. Yeah. But I know that anger's there, grief is there, pandemic, the riots, everything that's happening. So I think in the next few days, I think that I'd be able to better put it in words for you. But I'm in a very reflective mood. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough. Like, even as I introed this conversation, I struggle to get my words out. Like, you don't even realize as how stressed we are as humans until you start talking about it, and everything that you're seeing on TV, it starts manifesting itself, and it tugs on your emotions. So, Jatinder, I mean, you yourself being of the Punjabi, descent, you wear the turban, proudly, of course. How was it for yourself? I mean, we're talking about discrimination. It's 2020. You're a young man. Have you come across as discrimination?
Well, I just want to say thank you, Kamal, for this great opportunity. And I want to say hello, everyone, and that's watching. Um, it's not been a long time for me being in Canada, but whatever time I've been here, it's it's relatively been easy, I would say, because of the past and the way it's been handled before me, right? Um, I think thanks to the struggles of the communities that came before me, have had a very positive influence overall in terms of how people look at you, how people perceive you, how seriously do they take you. So I really want to applaud the people that have come across before me. But at the same time, when I was growing up in Canada, I I honestly did not feel as if it was a different country. It always felt home to me. Being in Toronto, a complete melting pot of all different cultures all around the world. Right? So growing up in Toronto, it was a blessing to have different people around me, and I think multiculturalism is, in a sense, a big blessing to everyone that lives in it, and I felt that. And at the same time, I think if had I not been opportune enough to land in Toronto, or had I been in a different place, I would have been seen in a different light altogether. Um, Due to obviously my visible minority signs, right? But to be honest, like I haven't really felt and then discriminated, except for once. That too, um, I do understand that people are ignorant all over the place. But other than that, it's been pretty good for me, to be honest. Yeah.
No, I mean, that's really good to hear. I mean, again, there's so much to celebrate, in Canada, the multiculturalism, the diversity. And like you said, it was a different story. When our parents came to Canada, I think they faced a lot more barriers,
That's correct.
but with that said, I think one thing Afia and I share in common is we grew up in Montreal, Quebec. And as beautiful as the city is, we grew up during the referendum, and I have to say, and Afia, I don't know specifically if you dealt with this as well, and I'll ask you that, but I can tell you it was blatant. I remember when I was in I think it was end of high school or early college, I don't remember, and I was on the bus with my best friend who's Italian, and the bus was going and going until there was just the two of us left on the bus, and the bus driver just stopped the bus, and we're kind of like looking at each other like, what's going on? And he came all the way to the back of the bus, started yelling obscenities in French, and was making remarks. He thought I was native, and it was very derogatory, very racist, and he literally kicked me off the bus. And my best friend was in shock. She says, I've never ever seen something like this. I never thought, this would happen. And I can tell you it was shocking, right? Because you're thinking again, I mean, it was still,
Right.
this isn't 1940 something, right? And I was a kid, and again, just looking at some of the unfortunate, my cousin, he, had an interracial marriage, a beautiful wife, Portuguese, and, we had an awesome wedding. But I remember one time shopping, and it was, her mother-in-law, who was Punjabi, and myself and a few other cousins, and treated very differently. So she was being treated in a certain respect, and her mother-in-law completely ignored. And she actually noticed it and said to the lady that this is my mother-in-law, and can you please serve her as well? And again, it's sometimes again manifests itself in a very direct way, and you see the discrimination, and sometimes it presents itself in a very like subconscious, not subconscious, but more not as direct. And some examples of that was in the workplace as well. So you know, And again, it's not singled out to racism, right? We look at sexism, we look at LGBT, and the list goes on. But at the end of the day, right? I don't know what this human characteristic is, but you look at there's two men out in space right now. We still forget brotherhood and sisterhood, right? Like it's so odd to me that it's 2020 and we can't still get this right. The notion of we're all human, we're brothers and sisters. I don't, it like boggles my mind. And it's such a simplistic principle. We still struggle with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, JT.
Yeah, sorry. I think the survival instincts of humans do come up when they're talking about their own race or their own ethnicity. Like, even if you look into different communities, or for example, in our community, in the Punjabi community, right? I mean, when it comes to, for example, marriage time, right? Your parents are generally looking for somebody that's more ethnic, I would say, right? Versus going outside of your ethnicity and stuff like that. Now, I mean, it's 2020 and things are changing, right? Definitely, parents are a lot more open nowadays, but there is a certain idea of purity in mind that I've seen in ethnicities across the board, and it can be black, white, Asian, African American. I mean, anything. There's a certain longingness for purity that people think is a lot more better than the others, right? But at the end of the day, we're all humans, I guess, right? So everyone across is brothers and sisters to us. And people tend to forget that idea, and they commit crimes, so to say, based upon their prejudice, because their longingness for that purity becomes a lot more of a bigger agenda than just being brothers and sisters at the end of the day, you know?
Yeah, it's very complex. Afia, I mean, what are your thoughts? Like, I guess, in terms of your experience, do you think, again, like we're going back to that question, it's 2020, and I know Will Smith, he said he put a quote out there saying, nothing has changed, it's being videotaped. Like, is that really, like, I mean, what do you think? Is it getting better? Or is it just, like he said, it's just now that it's being taped?
So very good question, because first of all, I think we need to also be very, and I don't want, I want to be very clear that I'm not saying it doesn't exist. It exists. Racism exists. Okay, point blank, just clear. But I think that we have to be careful what the media puts out there. I also think that we have to be careful with social media and what we, for instance, will take the riots right now. I remember in a class, I can't remember which class it was, but they said that rioters, leaders are paid to go out there to make a mess. The actual people who are actually standing for the cause are really peaceful. It's not them that, that's creating the mess out there, right? So I think we need to be very careful what we see. So, because the media can persuade us pretty much of anything. But that said, I think when we watch the news, we tend to have this feeling that, oh my gosh, like it's not getting better. It's getting worse. It's getting worse, right? So to answer your question, I really don't know if it's getting better or if it's getting worse. I'm all about statistics. I'm all about science. You've got to prove it to me. I gotta see. It would be interesting to actually conduct a study to see if it's actually getting worse, right?
Yeah.
The other thing is, with the president at the south of the border, without having to get political, he's not helping. He's not helping. He's just, adding, fuel to the fire, right? And then the last thing that I want to say is, I want people to remember this, okay? And I'm singling out Black people right now, African Americans, because this is what's highlighted in the news and what's actually happening. But if we really stop to think about it, it's only been 52 years to put an end to segregation. Let that sink in for a second. Let that sink in. Remember what happened during segregation. Black people weren't allowed to sit in the theater. They had to sit on the balcony, I think it is, the mezzanine, right?
Right.
They weren't allowed to with white people. Mind you, I prefer sitting in the mezzanine now, but they weren't allowed to mix, right? You had your coloreds here and you had your black and you had your whites here. And if a black man looked at a white woman, the black man looked at a white woman, he was lynched. All she had to do was say, he touched me. Sounds familiar? So I think that, you know, the reason why I bring this up is because we have to remember one thing. Is when segregation ended, there was no rehabilitation. It was like, okay, segregation ended, you go over here and I go over here. There was no healing. And so when there's no healing, it goes off into different directions. And I think that that's what's happening with the United States, with America. So I think this is a wake-up call. We all saw what happened in broad daylight. And I hope people, I hope it resonates in every single person, be it black, brown, white, I don't care. I hope it resonates and I hope it sinks in. You know, it's time for change. It's time to heal. All of us, every single person.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, is the notion of, we're standing up united, everyone. It doesn't matter, like you said, white, black, Asian, everybody. We need to, unite together for the greater good, for the greater cause. And, you bring up a good point. I think one of the key things is leadership. You can have progression, but it takes one leader to change the tone or not communicate. And there goes years and decades of progression. And it takes, again, it takes decades to build a movement, to build, social, perceptions and tolerance and respect and inclusion. And it takes seconds to just clear and wipe away effort. So that is, a really, really good point. And again, not to get political, but I've seen the message sort of not really being there anymore, and actually almost lending itself into questionable sort of feelings. So that is really, really tough. And actually, you also bring a really good point when you talk about it hasn't been that long. I mean, if you look at even voting, women being allowed to vote, I mean, this isn't something that changed like thousands of like hundreds of years ago, not thousands, sorry, but it hasn't been that long. So there's still it's fresh in a certain sense, and progress continues and will need to be made. I mean, there's this, again, these protests just don't happen like that. There's an underbelly of, continuous wrongs that are very difficult to digest. And then, when you have something like this, such a senseless loss of life, it just, comes up. So,
yeah.
Jatinder, were you going to say something?
I don't know. I think you summed it up pretty well, to be honest. But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it's just awareness, educating people. It's that core factor that we really need to figure out, because not a lot of people are getting educated properly and through the right means, I would say. Even let's even talk about gender discriminations, right? It's the same thing. Like men are told something else while growing up. Women are told something else while they're growing up, right? So, I mean, everybody really needs to come on the same page in order to end discrimination. at the end of the day, be it gender discrimination, be it color discrimination, be it whatever type of discrimination that there may be, And education is the only way, I believe, way forward for us as humans, And that's the day when we can celebrate the two men in the spaceship, and at the same time celebrate the humanity at the same time.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny, right? I mean, not funny, but yeah, I mean, no one's really, I mean, I saw the launch, and it was, I wanted to see it. I mean, it's of interest, but I didn't celebrate, my heart was somewhere else. And I think everybody's feeling the same way, when this affects us all, and it's very difficult. And actually, Afia, you bring another really good point in terms of media, right? With the proliferation of social media, it is very difficult to get to the truth. Like you said, there's influencers who are paid, and we're not even sure like what news is the fake news and what is the legit news and where the sources are coming from. So I would say to all Canadians too is to really be careful about what you're reading and where those sources are coming from, right, Afia?
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, that's really key. And again, I still feel like leadership is really really has I mean, I would say it's a responsibility. It is if you're going to be given the opportunity to lead, whether it is in your startup or your company or the government, it is a responsibility that should be given with that role to communicate diversity, respect, inclusion. It has to be there, because honestly, I feel like I have seen a major shift just with new leadership again in different realms. Whether in my workplace, I've seen it. We have a certain leader who was very verbal and communicative towards diversity, and it created a different culture. And somebody new might have come in and maybe didn't communicate that as much, and you sort of saw that take a back seat. And I feel like that is very critical.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I think that it's also important for you sort of touched on leadership and diversity. I think I do have a problem with that word for some reason. Diversity, it just doesn't sit well with me, and I think I'm still trying to decipher it. But I think one of the things that really, I think that sort of that sort of, I guess, kind of get under my skin is I don't want to see another potluck anymore. I don't want you saying to us, we practice diversity when you're the people at the top of the chain, don't resemble diversity or don't represent diversity.
I can tell you that is a contention point for sure. That's a contention, but I can't tell you how many times, in the workplace, I have been, I wanted to put together, a panel where we can discuss and have a real, serious discussion. And I can tell you many times it was, liquefied into, oh, but let's have a potluck and put on music. And it's like, I definitely agree. I mean, that is not the way to have a serious discussion. And again, I don't like. Again, I do have an issue with that word too, because it almost feels like, yeah, like here we are again dividing each other up. Like, why do we have to do that? Like, we're all humans, right? Why are we even need to do that?
Yeah, and I think the other aspect of it, why I don't like it, is that even though you're diverse, you're still not addressing the problem, right? It's the elephant in the room that nobody wants to talk about. Let's dress it up a little bit. Let's, it's still there. An elephant is the elephant. We need to talk about it, and that elephant is racism. We need to start talking about it. It is not just a black and brown problem. It is an everybody problem. And we need to start, I think organizations need to start coming up with tools to have those conversations. And if it makes you uncomfortable, then, we need to start asking ourselves some really deep questions if it does, so.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think there's still a lot of work to be. I mean, again, like it's no. We have come, and like you said, women are allowed to vote, and we've come strides ahead of where we were. But at the end of the day, that wasn't that long ago. So again, we have to look at that. And I can tell you, there's another thing I want to talk about. So I remember. When I was talking about, inclusion and but some of the programming at the workplace, and someone actually mentioned to me and said, Kamal, I don't really think we need this program. It's going to go obsolete. I'm like, what do you mean? Like, what are you talking about? Well, like if I look at my kids, picture at school, I mean, the kids, they're like visible minorities, they're like more gender represented, everything you can think of, she was mentioning. And I'm just shaking my head, right? Thinking like, do you watch the news? I mean, you can have a class that is as diverse as ever, and it doesn't mean that racism or discrimination will go away. Like, and it's again, it's that miseducation or miscommunication or whatever you want to call it. But yeah, I mean, there is this perception that look, we live in Canada. Go to Toronto, you go to Vancouver. It's as diverse as you can get. So this stuff doesn't exist. You guys are making it up, and it says you guys. And I don't like that. And it kind of goes to your point. Like, it's we're still putting up those divides, even when we're having a conversation.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I want to bring up a picture. I'm going to see if I could bring it up. So, this just happened. So this is Johnny Franklin. He's a police sheriff out of Flint. And, again, it's really tough. For myself, I do have a lot of family in policing, military. And so it's heartbreaking on all accounts because, myself, a lot of people don't know about this. But when I think it was probably 4 or 5, I got lost. I actually left the house as a kid. I didn't know when I was just walking around. I ended up getting lost. And it was actually a police officer that found me. And I remember I was bawling my eyes. I didn't know where the hell I was. And it was like getting dark. So it was dark on top. I was scared. And I remember sitting and I was just crying. He was trying to calm me down. I was in the cruiser and I was sitting in front with him, and he had a bag of chips. He couldn't think of anything. So he opened the bag of cheesies and he just handed it to me. He's like, here, everything's going to be okay. Here, have some chips. And, I love to eat, I don't know what, since I was a kid. And I just started eating it. And I was fine. I was like, just sitting eating my chips. And I remember he opened the door and he was carrying me, on his hips, and my mom was rolling on the doors, and he's looking like, and my mom's like, you weren't crying, you're just eating chips, and he handed me over, and so it was a funny story, but at the end of the day, we can't forget that, our men and women, our brothers and sisters, in the first responders and police, not everybody, is out there to do something bad or to, get back at a certain community. I mean, the majority of our officers join because they have a big heart, just like our nurses. They want to do something to help and better the community. I mean, a lot of them actually dealt with, really bad circumstances when they're growing up, and they actually want to make a positive change. And I'd like to remind Canadians, yes, there are bad, apples out there. We saw, obviously this, the latest example of it, but let's remember to not paint everybody with the same brush, right?
Exactly.
For sure.
And I just want to, again, bring this really nice example. He kind of, he went in and he dropped his baton and all his gear, and he said, how can I help? I'm here. I feel really bad, and how can I, and they started chanting, walk with us. And so he did. And it's this thing, right? We can't have these divides. Like, the community really has to bridge. The police have to bridge, and we have to do better at. I feel like, if there is issues internally in the police force, to sort of get at those roots as fast as possible and do something about it as quick as possible, because we can't take the chance. We can't take the chance of keeping someone that might not be there for the good intentions. Yeah. Any thoughts on that?
I think I'm just looking at the picture, and it took me a minute to realize what was happening, and you know, it's a beautiful picture. But the one thing that comes up, you know, one thing that I see in that picture is, and I realize is, we need to talk more. We need to communicate more, right? And I think that's where we start bridging the gaps. And we need to listen, and we need to start talking, and we need to start coming to a solution, right? And like you said, it's not all bad cops. I know some really good cops. You know, that's not fair to them to put them in a bucket and say, you guys are all bad, we're going to ship you to the bad cop island. You know, that's unfair, right? It's just like putting all black people in the bucket and saying, you know, you guys are all this, we're going to put you over here, you know. So I think we need to remember, and Kamal, I think you said it just right. You know, we have to remind people, you know, not all cops are bad. There are some really good cops. Unfortunately, you know, we saw a couple of bad ones, you know, this year, and yeah.
Yeah, it's really tough. And I'm going to show another picture that, again, Afia and JT goes up to, you know, our feelings of, you know, we have to stand up to racism as a community. Black lives matter, you know, all human lives matter, right? And you know, it's not like, oh, you know, this is like, you know, and another hashtag that was going is like, we all need to speak about it. Like, you know, let's talk. And just like Afia is saying, we all need to stand up for this because it impacts all of us. You know, we're living, like at any given point, the human dynamics can change, and any of us, any cultural group can all of a sudden be dealing with, you know, racism, discrimination. So it's in the responsibility of each and every human to stand up and with our brothers and sisters and combat racism, because it literally, not only does it hurt, it kills, and we just saw that, right?
Right.
So
I mean, racism, again, it comes all down to, as Afia said, we need to talk more. We need to get educated, right? We need to throw ideas at each other. That's where the change is going to happen. Change isn't something that happens by isolating yourself, right? Change happens when there is a dialogue between two different entities, and that can only happen when people are calm-minded and both parties mutually agree upon things, right? I mean, if we are ready to talk, and then the people on the other side are not, it doesn't make sense. Like, we all need to sit down and with a calm mind and get through this.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And so, you know, just to close out, I wanted to, you know, pay my respects to, you know, in memory of George Floyd. Again, my heart so heavy, like every single, you know, person that has seen this tragedy unfold. My heart goes out to George Floyd, his family, loved ones, the community. I just want to pay my respects. And Afia and JT, if you want to say a few words before we leave the conversation tonight.
I will leave Afia first.
I've been looking at his picture. I mean, it's so hard to turn on the TV or social media and not see his picture or Ahmad's picture, and all the others. You know, same here. My heart goes out to the family, to everybody who's grieving. I think we need to come together. I think that's what, you know, the protests are all about. And you know, we need to start healing. I mean, I just have no words. It's the truth. Like, I just look at his picture, and it's so difficult. It's so difficult to watch, because I don't just see George Floyd. I see a family member. I see my young cousins. Like, today, I meant to text my cousin, and he lives in Washington, and I know there's been some unrest, there's some protesting, and I meant to text him to see if he was okay, you know, and that's still on my mind. And I'm going to do that once we end this. But that's my George Floyd. That's my brother, you know, that's my cousin, my uncle, you know. So yeah, it's hard.
Yeah, it certainly is. Thank you, Afia. I know it's not easy. I appreciate that.
Well, definitely respects to the family, the Floyd family, and the families related to him. And definitely, I'm standing here in solidarity to against all of the crimes that have happened prior to George Floyd. And definitely, what I take away from this is we really have to uh, extend this dialogue
Yeah.
across nations, across communities, across people, so that events like these do not reoccur down in the future. You know? And another thing is we really need to celebrate the, the humanity that lies within us. And I think we have started celebrating less of humanity, and we have concentrated on celebrating things just based upon different cultures. And I think I'm not saying that it's bad, but at the same time, we really need to celebrate humanity in general. Sciences, we really need to celebrate people before us that have been big scientists and done something great for the humankind. And if we have similar ideologies, and similar goal sets, I think that bridge becomes a lot more simple at the end of the day. If we have different ideas, different ideologies, that bridge will keep on expanding from day to day out. This, the better we understand each other, the better we know each other, the better we can prevent such incidents in the future.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm going to take away from this incident.
Yeah, very well said, Afia and Jatinder. Thank you so much for having this conversation. I know it's not easy, so I appreciate that. And to everybody watching, I would say, it's been a very, very tough few months, and certainly a tough week. So hang in there. And I always like to promote, again, mental health services. This is a tough time. Please don't, if you do have to reach out, there's a number of resources and services, and I'll post in our comments afterwards a few resources that we can all reach out to, because we need each other now. We need the help now. And so thank you so much for watching. Stay safe, keep well, and let's be kind to one another. Thank you so much. Have a good night. And thank you, Afia and JT.
Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.